March 1993, Southern Sudan. A starving child collapses on the way to a feeding center. Behind the child, a vulture lands in the dirt. A photographer raises his camera. He takes the picture. That photograph will win the Pulitzer Prize. It will circle the globe. It will spark outrage. It will define a career. And within 16 months, the photographer will be dead. This is the story of Kevin Carter and the image that changed his life forever. Kevin Carter was born in 1960 in Johannesburg, South Africa. He grew up during apartheid, a system of institutionalized racial segregation enforced by the South African government. Violence, inequality, and state brutality were not distant concepts. They were part of daily life. As a young adult, Carter briefly joined the South African Air Force, but left. He drifted through jobs before discovering photography. Eventually, he found himself drawn to photojournalism. He became a part of a group of South African photographers later known as the Bang Bang Club. The group included Greg Marinovich, Yael Silva, and Ken Oosterbroek. They documented the intense political violence that marked the final years of apartheid in the early 1990s. Township massacres, street executions, burning bodies, and public lynchings. Carter was not photographing distant wars. He was photographing his own country tearing itself apart. Colleagues described him as sensitive and deeply affected by what he witnessed, but also driven. He wanted images that mattered. And in 1993, he would take one that mattered more than he could have imagined. In early 1993, Sudan was in the grip of civil war and famine. The country had been devastated by conflict between the Sudanese government and rebel forces. Infrastructure collapsed, food systems broke down, entire regions became inaccessible. In southern Sudan, particularly in areas like Ayoid, starvation was widespread. Children were dying from malnutrition at alarming rates. International aid agencies attempted to deliver food by air. Journalists were occasionally flown in with these relief flights to document the crisis. In March 1993, Kevin Carter traveled to Sudan with fellow journalist Yael Silva. They were transported on a United Nations aircraft into famine-stricken areas. Their job was simple in theory: document the crisis. But nothing about what they would see was simple. On March 11, 1993, Carter arrived in Ayoid, Sudan. The scene was devastating. Emaciated adults, crying children, the sound of suffering, the smell of death. At some point during his time near a feeding center, Carter saw a small child who had collapsed on the ground. The child was severely malnourished and appeared to be trying to reach a feeding station nearby. Moments later, a vulture landed behind the child. Carter saw the composition. He later said he waited approximately 20 minutes hoping the bird would spread its wings to make the image more dramatic, but it did not. He took several frames, and then he chased the vulture away. According to later accounts, journalists had been instructed not to touch famine victims due to risk of disease transmission. Sudan was experiencing outbreaks, including cholera. Carter reportedly did not physically carry the child to the feeding center. Accounts differ on how far the feeding station was from where the child had fallen, but it was nearby. He returned to the aircraft later that day. He later said he sat under a tree, smoked cigarettes, and cried. The photograph was sold and published by the New York Times on March 26, 1993. The image showed a skeletal child collapsed in the dirt, a vulture looming behind, and the framing created a stark visual metaphor: predator and prey. The photo spread quickly. Newspapers around the world reprinted it. Readers flooded the New York Times with calls and letters. One question dominated: what happened to the child? The newspaper printed a note explaining that the child had enough strength to walk away after the vulture was chased off, but the paper did not know the child's ultimate fate. That uncertainty fueled public anger. Soon a second question emerged, louder and more accusatory. Why didn't the photographer help? The image transformed from documentation of famine into a moral battleground. Criticism intensified over the following months. Some accused Carter of exploiting suffering for career gain. Others called him a vulture himself. Cartoonists drew him as a predator, holding a camera instead of helping a child. Many critics believed he had staged the image. There's no evidence that the scene was staged. Journalists present in Sudan at the time confirmed the famine conditions were real and widespread. Still, the public narrative hardened. Photographer sees dying child, photographer takes picture, photographer walks away. The simplicity of that story made it powerful and dangerous. On April 12, 1994, just over a year after taking the photograph, Kevin was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for feature photography. The Pulitzer Committee recognized the image as a powerful documentation of human suffering. For some, the award validated the importance of bearing witness. For others, it intensified criticism. To critics, the prize symbolized the reward of inaction. The debate grew larger than Carter himself. It became about journalism ethics, about intervention versus documentation, about whether photographers are observers, participants, or something in between. But for Carter, the public debate was personal. Friends and colleagues later described Carter as deeply troubled in the months following the Sudan photograph. It's important to understand that Sudan was not his first exposure to trauma. He'd spent years photographing neck lacings where victims were executed with burning tires placed around their necks, street gun battles, dead bodies in townships, the aftermath of political massacres. In 1994, his close friend and fellow Bang Bang Club member Ken Oosterbrook was shot and killed while covering violence in South Africa. Yao Silva was seriously wounded in the same incident. Carter was present that day. He reportedly struggled with depression, financial stress, and feelings of guilt. He also had a history of drug use. The Sudan photograph did not create his trauma, but it amplified public scrutiny of it. He once told a reporter he was haunted by memories of starving children, corpses, and angry gunmen. The weight of what he had witnessed did not disappear when he put the camera down. On July 27, 1994, Kevin Carter drove to a park in Johannesburg. He connected a hose from the exhaust pipe of his pickup cab into the truck. He died from carbon monoxide poisoning. He was 33 years old. In his suicide note, he wrote about being haunted by vivid memories of killings, corpses, and starving children. He mentioned debt and emotional pain. He expressed a desire to join Ken Oosterbrook. His death cemented the photograph's legacy. For some, it became the tragic story of a man destroyed by witnessing too much suffering. For others, it became a cautionary tale about the cost of documentary photography. Over time, parts of the story became distorted. Many people believe the child died moments after the photo was taken. That is not confirmed. Later reporting suggested the child reached the feeding center. The identity and ultimate fate of the child were never conclusively established. Some believe Carter simply walked away without concern. Accounts from colleagues described him as emotionally shaken and having chased the vulture away. The image became symbolic, and often symbols overshadow complexity. The photograph is frequently referenced in journalism ethics discussions, often without the full historical context of Sudan's famine, the chaos of the aid zone, or Carter's prior trauma. The story simplified into a moral headline, but real life was more complicated. The vulture and the little girl remains one of the most recognized photographs of the 20th century. It's taught in journalism schools, debated in ethics courses, shared in discussions about the responsibility of image makers. Kevin Carter's name is inseparable from it. His life, his struggles, and now his death are a part of the photograph's meaning. And the question that followed him still echoes. What is the responsibility of the person behind the camera? So this story, it raises a lot of questions for me. As I was researching this story, I'm not a scholar in the historical sense about the Sudan famine and all that incited, but as someone who has a deep respect for photojournalists, I must say, he took his opportunity to make a photograph that needed to be taken. And the fact that it's still talked about today, and it brings someone like myself and like others who only know of the Sudan famine and the history behind it because of the photo, it to me, it raises the question of, is it worth the public outrage to document history? And to me, the answer will always be yes. I think oftentimes there's this sense of irreverence when it comes to photojournalism. And, people in the public can often misconstrue your intentions. As you can see in this story, people don't know Kevin Carter's background. They didn't know that he had seen his friends get shot and die doing their jobs, doing what they needed to do to tell the story of history, especially going on in their home country. To me, if you were to ask me would I have taken the photo, I think the answer would be yes. That might be a hot take. But at the end of the day, if I've been specifically asked to not touch these victims due to risk of famine, disease spread, and I truly take that to heart, then I think the one thing that I would be able to do is tell that person's story. And for Kevin Carter, the best way he could tell that person's story was by, taking a photo of it and sharing it with the world. So in a way, he did have a responsibility to tell that story. And he did not have a responsibility, nor was he allowed to help the child. So those are my thoughts. But let's dive into a little bit of the actual, visuals of the photograph itself and break it down. It's crazy to me that stuff like this happened so recently as of 1994. I mean, when you talk about historical significance, famines seem like something to me that happened a long time ago. And knowing something as recent as 1994, there's been a famine that caused disease outbreak and suffering like this. It opened your eyes. And I think this photograph has, it allows me to see that. I don't think I would have ever known that without this photograph. And so just breaking it down from a technical sense, you see exactly why he waited for the vulture to spread its wings. And I think to me, that's the most, taboo part of this story is that he did wait. He said it was said 20 minutes for the vulture to spread its wings so he could get his photo. And to me, that's where a lot of people will be like, okay, well, he had a responsibility to document this photo, but did he really need to wait 20 minutes before scaring off the vulture? And when you look at the photo, maybe to some people that's not deemed necessary. But the photographer has to make their own choice as to what risks they're going to take when taking photos of things that clearly, historical moments that are terrible. Like this is like a horrible thing. And it's crazy, like talking about this as my first video of this series, because a lot of them will be much more lighthearted than this. And we'll get into some weird stuff, some fun stuff that doesn't have as much deep significance in this. But I wanted to come into this series with just a photo that to me changed my outlook on photojournalism as a whole, just because like the risk associated with going into an environment like this where disease is just so widespread. There's also like public killings going on. When you look at it like that, you start to understand the mindset and the risks that these guys are taking by going and doing what they're passionate about and what we have honestly a responsibility as humans to document history. And I think people like Kevin Carter are almost heroes and villains of photojournalism, because in my mind, it's heroic in a sense of like, this has immortalized this moment in a way that no paper on text could ever, necessarily show this. When you look at something so, almost graphic like this, like it's not a graphic photo, but because the backstory of the situation, it becomes, it becomes a heavy photo. And so I think like there's a place in photography for fun images, lighthearted images, like images that don't cause a shift in culture or disturbance in culture and history. But where's the art in that? And where is the history in that when we have things like this that did shift culture and shift the story of, this child's life and Kevin Carter as a whole. And obviously it led to his demise because of the public outrage associated with this photo, which to me is a tragic loss, obviously. But isn't it great that we have people who are willing to make these sacrifices in their life to document history so that we can empathize with people that we will never meet, that we have no idea what's going on in their lives. And I think photography as a whole can do that for people. They always say a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I think, when you see a photo of someone in African culture, it's actually said in a lot of places that when someone takes a photo of you, it takes a part of your soul. And while I do not believe that, I do believe that a photo can allow you to see someone in a way that you would never know because you can't meet them in person. You know, I will never meet many people in the photographs, like 99.99% of the people that I've seen in photographs of famous historical photographs or most popular images in the entire world. But in a way, you get a glimpse into that person's story. In a way, you get a glimpse into that person's story. And I think that's something that is invaluable. You cannot put a price tag or you can't ascribe value or worth to a photo that has this much impact on history. And so that's why I wanted to do this series. I'm excited to give you guys some more content to learn and listen about the history of photography and some of the fun and crazy things, but also some of the deeply impactful things that happened in photography, like this story today. So thanks for sticking around. This is the first of many videos. So if you like it, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment telling me what you guys think. And I can't wait to see you guys next time.